better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could
My Gavanin, Matt.
My Gavanin to you, Rob.
And my Gavanin to all of you listeners and friends of the show. Welcome to another episode of Dungeon Master of None.
I'm Dungeon Master Matt.
And I'm Dungeon Master Rob. And we have a very special late-breaking news story. Not really. We're doing media analysis. We're doing criticism. We're responding to events that have occurred.
Events in the discourse going on over the last 22 years.
Yeah.
It's like the opening of Superman. 2 years ago, a book was published. 1 year ago, a man tweeted. 20 years ago, WotC was taken over by Hasbro.
Yes, 50 years ago, D&D was published. Yeah. Also, in addition, 50 years ago, D&D was published, and this is widely regarded as a bad move and made everybody mad.
Made everyone upset. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. 500 years ago, Constantinople fell. And we'll attempt in this episode to tie all of those strands together in this one moment as of 5 seconds ago, Rob and Matt recording this podcast. So we're talking about D&D. We're talking about Elon Musk. We're talking about race and race, more accurately, racism and colonialism and its legacy and how all these things intertwine.
We've talked about some of this before, and some of this is not going to be new, but the reason for this is that I think last week, Adam Serwer of The Atlantic, bad magazine, good writer, published an article entitled
"This is Why NATO is Like the Lord's Alliance of the Sword Coast."
God, I wish he had written that, because that would be actually maybe even more
hilarious.
fun to talk about. Yeah. Why Elon Musk needs Dungeons and Dragons to be racist, which is a really good article and interesting. It brought up some interesting things and tied a bunch of stuff together in a way that I thought was very compelling. It also provoked another round of discourse. People were mad, as they often are. If this doesn't sound good to you, that's fine. You don't have to listen. But before you most of our longtime listeners, I think, will probably be amenable to this. But if you are discovering us or stumbling upon this, I would encourage you to not just turn this off and maybe listen. And I want to say one thing from Serwer's article before we go further that I think is important. And he says, and we'll get into what he's talking about, the point is not that Tolkien was a Nazi or that people who enjoy or respect Tolkien, myself included, are Nazis. That would be a childish way to approach literature. But the ideas embedded in his influential stories have been reproduced in countless fictional works since few examples are more vivid than Dungeons & Dragons.
I think this point also applies to both Tolkien and Dungeons & Dragons and to us.
Yes.
And it's a frustrating conversation in that many people who talk about this want to approach these works of art or creative production in that childish way. Is it good or is it bad? Right?
Yes.
And no, we're talking about art. We're talking about literature. Let's think about it for a second. If you enjoy
just a little
thinking about it, just for 2 seconds.
And it's also important to understand that we all like these things. I wouldn't spend this time on Lord of the Rings or Dungeons & Dragons if I did not care about this hobby, about these works of literature. Serwer is getting tons of heat from the regular usual suspects, but I don't think that there is a bigger nerd than Serwer in any of the literate class. Like he by his own admission loves Lord of the Rings, played D&D when he was 12 years old. Like he is doing this because he cares about these things, in the same way that we are doing this because we care about these things. We want to talk about them. We want to think about them just a little bit. So bear with us as we sort of go through what I think are some pretty interesting and also worthwhile examinations of the roots of racism in D&D, its links to Tolkien, and why Elon Musk is so fucking mad about it.
Yeah, so I mean, the other strand is not just, hey, criticism of art is not only fun, it makes you smarter, and in the case of Dungeons & Dragons, could maybe even make you a better dungeon master or game designer or even player.
It also
so
goes without saying that like
good.
it'll help you make your games more accessible and welcoming to people who are not white men. Like, you know,
right.
It's worth doing, right? It's worth thinking about for lots of reasons. Even if you are a white man, like there's reasons to do this. But yeah, continue, Matt.
The second strand is why we're talking about it now, why Serwer wrote about it, is that there is the stream of the ever-present war on culture, or the culture war, as the layman
you might call it.
So yes, and so you know you can either approach this as, okay, I'm ready, sign me up for the war on culture.
That's right.
But you know, like, I think it goes without saying, I think we all know a little bit of what's going on here. Elon Musk has. To some degree, it's always been, but especially in the last like 7 or 8 years, been a culture warrior, right? Yeah. Pushing like reactionary thought in every space and conservative thought in every space he can get his hands on, or that seems important to him. And the same goes with the other people. So that's kind of the other context of this discourse.
Right. We talked about Musk's comments previously, and I'm not going to go into detail about them, but the sort of the inciting incident, as it were, is the publication of a history book about Dungeons and Dragons, the
making of original Dungeons and Dragons, 1970 through 1977. The project lead is Jason Tondreau, friend of the show, and the curator is historian John Peterson.
So the issue is, and this is really funny because like 90% of the book is just a history and a republication of original Dungeons and Dragons materials. There is, however, a brief.
Wait, can I pause? It's just to remind people, like, it's so fucking cool not only to like get the original print-offs of Dungeons and Dragons, like put in this like nice bound volume and context, but also like notes and letters and drafts from like the archives that were not accessible between Gygax and Arneson and many other people. And then, you know, like also a bunch of precursor stuff like chainmail and earlier like sources of sketches and notes and other published games that were very important. So like if you want to understand, oh, hey, here's like the material that was originally published and what led up to it. It's such a cool book.
Great book. Really cool book from people who are very big fans of Dungeons & Dragons, enthusiastic about it. It does include a very brief preface and a foreword in which the authors make some, what I consider to be pretty like innocuous statements about what D&D was like at its inception. Matt, do you want to read sort of like the nut graph, the thing that everybody is mad about, if you don't mind?
I guess there's two things.
I guess there's two things, yeah.
The first is from a lovely and very short, like it's 2 pages, preface by Jason Tondreau, in which he talks how much he loves D&D, how cool it is, how, you know, awesome and important it is, and how fun it is to like put this together. After that, and some other notes, he writes, get where I can actually, this thing is
a large book,
massive.
Substantial.
So I can see it and talk into the microphone at the same time. This book presents, quoting now, this book presents D&D as it was first imagined, warts and all. What sort of warts are we talking about? One example is including creatures from other intellectual properties, such as J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle-Earth, without permission. In later printings of D&D, Balrogs, Hobbits, and Ints were renamed Balors, Halflings, and Treants to avoid these copyright issues. So you can actually see, hey, this is the first printing. It says Hobbits in there. It's pretty cool.
Yes. Not controversial. It's known. It's just, you know.
Some language in the first iteration of D&D presents a moral quandary. The document reproduced in this book includes many pages of charts and tables alongside lists of monsters, spells, and magic items. But that game content also includes a virtual catalog of insensitive and derogatory language, words that are casually hurtful to anyone with a physical or mental disability who happens to be old, fat, not conventionally attractive, indigenous, black, or a woman. Some people have charitably ascribed this language to authors working from bad assumptions. In the 1970s, historical wargamers players in America were predominantly white middle-class men. It isn't surprising that they would dub the class of soldiers the, quote, fighting man, unquote. But when in the pages of Greyhawk, the description of the Queen of Chaotic Dragons includes a dig at women's lib, the misogyny is revealed as a conscious choice. It's an unfortunate fact that women seldom appear in the original D&D, and when they do, they're usually portrayed disrespectfully. Slavery appears in original D&D not as a human tragedy that devastated generations over centuries, but as a simple commercial transaction. The cultural appropriation of original D&D ranges from the bewildering, like naming every 6th level cleric a llama, to the staggering. Gods, demigods, and heroes, not reprinted in this book, includes game statistics for sacred figures revered by more than 1 billion people around the world, where players expected to fight Vishnu, one of the principal deities of Hinduism, kill him, and loot his +3 sword of demon slaying. Despite these shortcomings, D&D has always been a game about people choosing to be someone unlike themselves and collaborating with strangers who become friends. It has slowly become more inclusive, and the player base has become more diverse. The pool of creators who make the game has expanded to include people with a broader range of identities and backgrounds. And these new creators make the game more welcoming. The game has attracted new fans who, in turn, continue to make the game more inclusive. The future of Dungeons & Dragons, here at its 50th anniversary, is bright. It all starts with the pages to follow.
Like I said, fairly innocuous, uncontroversial because it's true in what it describes. However, this came to the attention of failed game designer and breast milk enthusiast Mark Kern, better known as Grums online, who made a bunch of tweets where he gets a bunch of stuff wrong, including calling it the 40th anniversary instead of 50th anniversary, and bitches about all of this stuff. He claims that there are lies in the foreword. Doesn't matter. It's all very, very stupid. But because one, Elon Musk either follows or is aware of Grums, it came to his attention and he got all bent out of shape and he said, "Nobody, and I mean nobody, gets to trash Gary Gygax and the geniuses who created Dungeons and Dragons. What the fuck is wrong with Hasbro and WotC? May they burn in hell." And then he tweeted about buying Hasbro and a bunch of other stuff, and then he got distracted by some other shit. And
he got distracted by spending millions of dollars to elect the current president of the United
Donald
States
Trump.
and
Yes.
then eviscerate parts of the federal
Yes.
government. It's so I think this it made it to Musk through Mark Kern and partially from Robert J. Kuntz. That's his name. And Rob Kuntz is one of the first 5 or 6 employees at TSR who did work on a bunch of original D&D stuff, though not the, of course, 3 first books. He seemed really mad that they didn't even mention me in this book, and they're just trashing Gary and Dave, which of course is not true. The previous pages of the forward and previs and all the other commentary added are look how cool this is.
You heard what was written, and it doesn't sound like they're trashing anybody. It's just some useful context. But yeah, Mr. Kuntz was upset about this. He blogged about it. Just like Musk, also wrong. The book mentions his name several times as being employed at TSR, and so it's a lot of people that are either incredibly stupid or acting in bad faith. And I think it's very clear to just be hey, this is the culture war. D&D woke now. They're taking everything from you or something. And, that's right.
Rob and I have no deep love for Hasbro or WotC. Yes. But
don't mistake this for a defense of Hasbro or WotC, because that's not what it is. But
I mean, this approach of D&D is woke, writing a preface contextualizing this stuff in the thing is some grave sin, is incredibly stupid. By the way, I should point out that the book reprints all of the stuff that was mentioned as, hashtag problematic in full, right? It's there, right? The preface is just there to hey.
It's just context.
Guess what? it's there's some stuff here that's not great, but hey, we printed it anyway, so you can see the original documents. And it's like, wow, I mean, you would think like that would be something that even these people would be okay with, but no, they're just mad.
No, they're just mad. And we'll get into this more a little bit later, but like, if somebody comes up and says Gary Gygax had some problematic views, that's also like not uncontroversial. Here's some actual words that Gary Gygax wrote down himself. Damn right, I am sexist. It doesn't matter to me if women get paid as much as men, get jobs traditionally male, and shower in the men's locker room. They can jolly well stay away from wargaming in droves for all I care. I've seen many a good wargame and wargamer spoiled thanks to the fair sex. I'll detail that if anyone wishes. So like...
Right. And that was like published in one of the mini fanzines that circulated around the time D&D was created. Shout out to Ben Riggs for like writing up this another great historian of D&D.
Great article that Ben Riggs wrote about this. I don't really like care to like enumerate Gygax's faults. It's not all that interesting to me. It's also like well known, but like if somebody clutches their pearls over you saying a mean thing about Gary Gygax, be like, he said that about himself. Like he said, I am a sexist. Like, what do you like? What do you want from us? Like, how are you supposed to talk about a person if like saying things that are true that they admitted like is beyond the pale? To come back to the Serwer article, right? This is all the context.
Yeah, this is the context of why do people who ascribe to, let's say, Muskist thought, why did they get mad about this? But like, why do they need to stay mad about this?
Yes.
Right? Why must they always be mad and nude and read online?
Because like, there's a thing. So like, if you're, let me very briefly, like if you're somebody who hears like, oh, white people think mayo too spicy, and that makes you mad, fine. Or like, if someone's like, men are awful, and that makes you mad, like, I think you should probably get over it. But like, that's not even what's happening here. Like, nobody's like putting like even tepid insults against men or white people. They're just like, here are some other people who might like to be included in this hobby. And that makes Grumsists like furious, right? So like, they're not even being directly insulted. They're just a perception that something is being taken away from them. And that's kind of like the key insight of Serwer's article, and one of the things that I want to talk about. I want to go a little bit deeper than he does and sort of like take a broader view, because I liked what he was talking about, but Matt and I are big nerds, especially when it comes to both like Tolkien and D&D. So like Serwer,
like what is being taken away from?
That's right.
Exactly. Right. And if we can figure that out, we might actually figure out like what sort of ideology that is either latently or in some cases explicitly in the original D&D that is so important to these current crop of billionaire or failed millionaire reactionaries.
That's right. One more thing very briefly. If you believe that things used to be better, or they were better in the past, or they were better in a traditional way, that's called being a conservative, like a small c conservative. That is a valid political viewpoint. It's not one that I generally hold, though I will admit there are some things that I think used to be better. That is a small c conservative belief that I have. The issue arises, or one issue that arises, when people claim that they're not conservatives. Oh, I'm a liberal. It's the left that's gone too far. It's too woke. Listen, if you think things used to be better, you might be a conservative. That's okay. It's hard to talk about this if you won't admit like what you believe. I'm a leftist. Everyone hates the things that I believe. They're very, very unpopular. But I'm aware of that. And so like when I tell people what I believe, we don't have to argue about like what that is, because I'm not pretending that I'm something I'm not, that's part of the issue here, is that people like Musk believe themselves to be in the center, or they used to. I think he's probably admitted now that he's a right-winger. But for a long time, he was like, no, I'm a liberal or whatever. But they're lying. And then that's part of the issue with having this conversation.
Yeah, and I this is a more general issue with politics, at least in North America, is that there's a certain class of public political figures who are not very clear about like spelling out what their
Yes.
first principles are, what their like beliefs, what their goals are for society, and so it can make things kind of frustrating. And
sometimes this is strategic, and
usually have
sometimes
to do it for them.
it's ignorance. But if it's perfectly valid to believe that things used to be better. You should know what that means. Anyway, let's go to Tolkien, because Serwer, I think, correctly starts with Tolkien, because where do we get humans, elves, dwarves, orcs, goblins from? Generally, it is from Tolkien. This is the tree from which everything springs. And Serwer,
and if the copyright infringements weren't enough to convince you, and just common sense and a crude social knowledge, that Tolkien is a very important influence on D&D. Like the first publication of Gary Gygax, right, has a dragon that's like, hey, yes, Gary Gygax, alias Smaug, as in the dragon. Yeah.
Sometimes people will, not entirely incorrectly, say that, actually, Gygax was influenced by Howard instead. Like he was really like building it off of Conan or something. And like that's not like untrue, but like let's be serious here. Like you're not. Yeah. It's not like a good faith argument.
I think he liked Howard and Lieber more than Tolkien. But Tolkien is the bigger fantasy property that more people are familiar with. He put hobbits into his game rules and got sued for it.
Yes. So Tolkien. Was Tolkien a racist? Was a man born in Victorian England and raised in the Edwardian era? South Africa. Did he have some? I said born in England. I meant born in the British Empire. Born in South Africa, raised in the Edwardian era. Could he possibly have had some complicated racial beliefs? Who knows? Who's to say? But here's some like actual things that he wrote about orcs, right? When he described them in one of his letters, he said they were squat, broad, flat-nosed, sallow-skinned, with wide mouths and slant eyes. In fact, degraded and repulsive versions of, to Europeans, least lovely Mongol types. Not the greatest thing that you want to hear from Tolkien, and it's also sort of important to bear in mind, and a lot of this comes, by the way, from an article written by a academic Mills called "The Wretched of Middle-Earth," which is a really great name for really great title for an article.
Charles W. Mills
about race in Tolkien, and I think Mills actually comes down way harder on Tolkien than I would personally, but he does a really good job of. It's very well evidenced and it's very well supported, and he makes the point, and I think this is an important point, that Tolkien, in his own legendarium, was like, this is the history of our world. Middle-Earth is our world, as he says in one of his letters or appendices. He was building a mythology for England, for the world in general. It took place in some sort of imagined mythopoetic past, but this was deliberate, right? This was...
Imagine reading the romances of King Arthur and then, like, at age 12, discovering that they're actually French, and it just making you so mad like you get a PhD.
You never get over it.
Damn it! I'm gonna get a PhD and do something about this.
I gotta do something.
I think Tolkien had this feeling that England was lacking in this deep mythology, and so he probed the existing mythological kind of medieval writings like Geoffrey of Monmouth and others, and was like very inspired by them when creating Arda, when creating Middle-Earth and his whole corpus of works. And of course it was also about writing about languages, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm. And Tolkien was was a classicist, a medievalist. Like he's when we talk about him, it's important to know that he was living and writing and sort of like conversing with classic and medieval texts largely, that he situated himself in that context. And if he can be, I think, forgiven, and I think it's because he was actually not engaging with a lot of like the modern eugenicist racial hierarchies that were going on around him. It was more that he was in a kind of like medieval categorization, and this is one of the things that Mills points out, which was more around wildness, barbarity, savagery opposed to civilization, which does not make it like racially unproblematic, but like it's not. I do not think that Tolkien was not a Klansman. I don't think that he was like, and he was offended by like, German anti-Semitism and specifically opposed it and did not like sort of like their type of racial hierarchy, but that does not mean that there's not a different form of it that appears in Lord of the Rings.
Right. And this is where we all have to put on our big person pants.
That's right.
And be like, hey, like, could you say Tolkien bad? Could you say Tolkien good? Yeah, you can. But the more interesting is not just like saying Tolkien racist. It's like trying to understand the context of what he was writing and what he believed, that basically developed the very particular brand of colonialist and racist ideas that are in Tolkien. And yeah, some of it is he's a modern person, is modern racism, but I think Mills very correctly argues that it's a lot of that kind of earlier forerunner racism and ideas about the hierarchy of peoples, right? Of like noetic, like racism about Sham, Ham, and Japheth and stuff like that. These things that and that sort of language is very much the language that Tolkien uses.
And that's I think that's very I think Mills is right about this, and it's very interesting. A lot of people, given like the timeline for the publication of Lord of the Rings, are like, oh, the orcs, those are Nazis, or those are communists, even better. And like one, I think it's an absolute like moronic reading of it, but like Tolkien specifically refuted this, which doesn't always mean something, but in this case I think it's absolutely correct that that's wrong, because Mills points out that well, one, Tolkien came up with this before World War I. Like this Lord of the Rings had been percolating for most of his life, but two, he was relitigating like the Middle Ages, like the fall of Constantinople. Like that's what his sort of like ongoing battle was, not the battle against fascism or communism. And where this gets kind of interesting is about orcs.
More work. Yes, my lord.
There are also brown and black men in Lord of the Rings. There's Southrons and Easterlings, and there's a specific moment, one of my favorites, one of the most beautiful, I think, in the Two Towers, where Sam comes across a dead Southron and says, wonders whether or not like what got him to come to war, and wouldn't he rather have been at home and warm and safe? And it's a very like thoughtful moment. I think in the movies, that's when Faramir says, war will make corpses of us all. So like it's clear that he considers the full breadth of humanity in many ways, but orcs do not receive the same generosity anywhere in Tolkien's works. They are to be slaughtered en masse, right? They are irredeemable, just evil creatures that that the good guys can kill wantonly and without regard or remorse, which, if you don't think about it, maybe seems fine. If you think about it just a little bit, it's interesting. Again, not Tolkien good, not Tolkien bad, just isn't that interesting, don't you think? Like, what's going on there? And there's we'll circle back around to this, but like N.K. Jemisin has a pretty good article on this, and one of the things that she says is orcs are the fruit of the poison vine that is human fear of the other. In games like Dungeons and Dragons, orcs are a fun way to bring faceless, savage, dark hordes into a fantasy setting and then gleefully go genocidal on them. And I think she's right about that. Orcs are just sort of like an embodied other. They can be a stand-in for any kind of faceless horde, which doesn't necessarily have to be associated with any like actual group or race, but often can be because of how useful that is as just how useful they are as a generalized stand-in.
Right. Mills points out, and building on this, is that like orcs in this like other category, they don't even get the same race science. It's not really science, or race biblical science of the Ham, Sham, Japheth tripartite division that every other race in Tolkien gets, from hobbits to elves to men, right? There's just orcs.
They're just to the whole race thing, interestingly, or maybe not, in Tolkien's sort of hierarchy, elves are at the very top. Mills suggests Aryan, and then there's men and hobbits and dwarves in the middle, and then orcs at the bottom or even beyond the hierarchy. But like, Tolkien didn't think of himself as an elf. Tolkien thought of himself as a hobbit. Tolkien explicitly was like, I am a hobbit. These flawed, lazy sort of homebody creatures, that's me. That's who I think is cool. So like, not again the kind of virulent racism that maybe some other people we're talking about have. It's a different kind of thing. So what's interesting about orcs, though, and I never get tired of talking about this, so you'll have to bear about with me, is that Tolkien really struggled with orcs later in his life after having written this, because he was a Catholic, and he deliberately and explicitly applied sort of like a Catholic worldview to Lord of the Rings. And one of the things about that is obviously sentient creatures have souls and can be redeemed, and evil cannot make, can only mock, it can only twist and pervert, right? It can't create anything new. So how is it that orcs can speak and have civilization and do things that sentient races can do, but also be
Mills
sort of like,
says he uses colonies to describe their cities and stuff like that. They have places. They build stuff. They have songs.
They have songs. They talk. They have menus, Matt. which meat is on sometimes.
Sometimes. It's sad when it's not on the menu, but boy, when it's on. Have a great time, boy. All right, boys. Yeah. So, I mean, this is such a like pervasive problem. There's a whole Wikipedia page to vote.
It's a very good Wikipedia page. And look, spoiler alert, he never solves it, but like, He goes back and forth about the origin of orcs again and again. Sometimes they are corrupted men or elves. Sometimes they're just literally created by Morgoth. Sometimes they're twisted beasts. But like, if they were created by Morgoth, well, they can't be. You can't create a sentient creature. Right. Only Eru Ilúvatar can do that. So and Morgoth cannot. And if they were beasts, they wouldn't have speech, right? And all these orcs, like Gorbag, wouldn't be able to talk. And if they're
Gorbag is the one that captures
captures
Frodo,
Sam.
And they think he's dead. They take him to the Tower of Cirith Ungol in the Two Towers. Yeah. But it's a lot of orc dialogue is what we
That's right.
there.
The orcs talk. They have thoughts. Somewhere else, I think it might have been Mills, or maybe a different author points out that, in The Hobbit, Azog comes to avenge his father Bolg, who was killed by, I think, Durin in the Mines of Moria. If orcs can avenge their fathers, that suggests a more complicated form of sentience and belief than just raw evil. And if they are corrupted Maya or elves or men, that means that they are. That they have souls that could be redeemed, and they should be treated with mercy, possibly. They should not be just wantonly murdered. Like I said, Tolkien never comes up with a solution for this. He grapples with it for his entire life, and I think Christopher Tolkien ultimately comes down on the created by Morgoth thing, but I don't trust Christopher Tolkien, so whatever. But it...
The answer, right, is that this seriously, Tolkien took his world building seriously, as I think any good world builder who wants their readers to take their world building seriously should. And he couldn't, honestly, it seems like he couldn't ever land on a satisfactory conclusion to satisfy the idea that, oh, hey, these things we should celebrate. They're killing without fail, not just in battle, but just kill them all the time. It's no problem, with his Catholic views on the soul.
Yeah. And sometimes people say, "Oh, it's not that serious. Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" Well, Tolkien thought it was serious, and I think that even if it's for a game or a fantasy book, I think it's worth taking seriously, and he did too.
If he were alive today, he would. Well, first he would say, "What's a podcast?" And then I think he'd be interested in talking and sharing his thoughts. I mean, he did with his mini letter writers.
He did. So. He liked to talk about this. He thought it was a complicated question, which brings us to D&D, I think.
Yeah.
Because D&D inherited the same sort of like racial hierarchy, but with substantially less nuance, unfortunately. And
less thought going into it. It's like, hey, you like playing your medieval war games? What if you controlled, just one adventurer, and what if they could be an elf? Okay, cool. Yeah. Let's go.
Cool. And as many people know, in very early editions, your class was the same as your race. Like it was you were a dwarf, and that meant this is what you can do. You're an elf, that this is what you can do. And it became a little bit looser over time, but for most of D&D's history, your race has been sort of like an essential part of your package of abilities and your intelligence, your hardiness, your what you can do, whether or not you have magic. Fun. It's no longer the case that like dwarves can't do magic, but it used to be the case that they couldn't, and so on and so forth. Like,
right, because of Tolkien, really.
Because of Tolkien.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I think the interesting contribution here of D&D is not only like personalizing fiction, right, where like people have characters, right, and they are responsible for those character actions, like at least within the story, right? But also, I think more importantly, is adding like ideas of like stats and traits and limits. Oh, you can't have over this stat as this. You can't go higher than this level in this class as this race.
Right, and this is where Matt's right. This is a distinct addition from D&D, right? Tolkien implied certain racial differences, but like Gygax encoded them, right? You're an elf, you have +2 dexterity. You're a dwarf, you have +2 constitution. You have precise.
This is so funny that it's like circled back around sometime in the aughts. I remember reading like a D20 role-playing book that was like set in a fantastical North America, where it was like colonial times, and you could be English or Scottish or a native person or a Dutch settler, and they all had different stat adjustments, like races in D&D, and I was just like, oh boy.
I mean, that's the thing. Like when you hear
gonna be a Scotsman to get a +2 to Constitution.
When you hear this race is more intelligent by 2 points, what does that sound like to you, Matt? Like what does that make you? What does that make you think of, right? Because Tolkien, to his credit, wasn't like, yes, elves are swifter and better with crafting, but like it was somehow it's better that it's just sort of like poetic and mythological than like, oh,
elves are just better at everything.
Yeah, we're gonna put numbers on it. We're gonna make it. Yeah. We're gonna quantify how much smarter an elf is than an orc, right? Like that's where does that come from? I wonder. Anyway, moving on.
To quote our sources, right, from AD&D, so something that's not in our little Making of D&D collection, right, races are given advantages or limits mainly because the whole character of the game would be drastically altered if it were otherwise.
It's right there. And this is funny, Matt, like I've enjoyed playing an orc and a dwarf and a half-elf. I never considered that to be like the like crucially most interesting or important part of D&D play to me. No. It was just like an element of my character. But I think for a lot and for early on, the playing a different race was like a critical part of D&D play, and which is why one of the things that is talked about in Serwer's article, and he interviews some modern creators. It's got 50 years of design debt, basically, like of baggage that you can't get rid of, and then a big chunk of that is races, which are now, sorry, we should be clear, they're now species. That's not new. They've been species for a while now, but that was part of the change. You can't get rid of it. You can't entirely get rid of it.
And part of it is like fun. Like people like being like, ooh,
it is fun.
I'm a sexy elf. I'm a big old orc. Yes. And we're not saying like, hey, no one has ever had fun or a good time playing with it. Obviously they have. So
obviously, yes.
We're just saying, well, let's think about where that came from. Does it mean you need to do anything differently? Maybe, but maybe not, Maybe not. It's like, hey, yeah.
Well, a key part of this, and this is in Serwer's article, is like if you want to play a game where it's like all white men and like chainmail babes in bikinis, you do that. No one's stopping you. No one can stop you from doing that. But if you want to do something differently, if you maybe want to do something a little bit better, like that's also a thing. And this is where
it's very funny that like again, WotC, maybe not my favorite company, but the thing that like Mark Kern and Elon Musk are complaining about is like, no, they're taking us away. Like the thing you're complaining about is a republished original D&D that you could play right now if you wanted to. Made it easier than ever.
I know.
Of course, all these things are also available.
The thing still exists.
Print on demand.
This racial hierarchy evolves into D&D. And one thing that Mills points out with Tolkien, which is interesting, is that Rune and Harad, the places where the Southrons and the Easterlings come from, are just kind of just spaces. They're locations. They don't have the same density of like capitals, cities, civilizations that Gondor or Rohan or the Shire do. And this is replicated somewhat in early D&D. Later this changes, but like Chult and Tian Sha and a bunch of the other like non-central locations are just fuzzy spots on a map, and where vaguely Asian people come from or vaguely African people come from. They're not given the same kind of agency existence. They're not treated as having real people in them, basically. And
right.
Even more so with anywhere that like has orcs. Any orc land is usually like a, here's some tribes or something, or the wastes, and this continues for decades, right? Like this is not.
And I mean, I think this is kind of a cool thing, right? Is that a lot of world building that went into early D&D or its subsequent iterations. Thinking of like Faerun here, right? Reproduces that sort of thing that Mills identifies about Tolkien, is that, okay, there's one part of the world with a history, and Harad and Rune do not. And so like Faerun kind of replicates that, but subsequent generations of creators, usually to the original creators' delight, have like, hey, we added a history of this. And of course, early attempts are often pretty ham-fisted and maybe not great, but like, oh, hey, we can expand this world.
Well, and now finally we have some really terrific books on Tian Sha and other parts of Faerun. Like there have been, those places have been drawn in. Like as a young man, I was fascinated by like Rune and Harad, and like that seemed like interesting space to imagine. And maybe, I don't know, someday Tolkien would have gotten to it. But like Matt said...
And it's just Tolkien sneaking into your subconscious being like, yeah. No, you can only study Western history. Those other places, they don't have one.
But like Matt makes the good point is that...
Atlanticist.
Sometimes... Atlanticist. Matt makes a good point that like sometimes these are left blank just out of habit. And then when somebody comes along and says, oh, I would like to detail that, then the original creators like are awesome. That's good. And we've had time to build on that. But what happens is, it creates kind of like a rigid way of thinking. And I don't want to let I want to. Gygax has less to say about race than he does about women. Thank God. But like he does, his views are pretty clear on this. Like in a 2005 forum post, which we've talked about before, somebody asks, like, is it okay to kill the children of like of like evil creatures? And Gygax comes in and says, of course it is. Nits make lice, which is a direct quote of Colonel Chivington talking about a massacre of American Indians. You could argue that Gygax didn't know that. I don't believe that. I think he knew exactly what he was doing. I think he knew exactly who he was quoting and what he was implying. And there's two things that I want to say about that. We've talked about this before, but I also never get tired of talking about it. One, that's insane, Matt. If you're creating a game and you've explicitly like written in, it's okay to murder children, you're creating like a child murdering simulator. Like, that's weird, right? That's a weird thing to be like, yeah, of course you can murder infant orcs because they're evil. That's weird. And two, as Serwer correctly points out in his article, a congressional committee at the time referred to the Chivington slaughter, as a cowardly act that gratified the worst passions that ever cursed the heart of man. That was quite bad in the 1860s. Like, that is not, that's not good. That's not something that you should cite for any reason.
I'll point out just for added footnote for the context of Gygax's forum post, the first person to reply points out that this is a quote.
That's right.
From John Chivington, and so like whether Gary was aware of it when he made his first post, he was
definitely aware pretty quickly afterwards. So here's the thing about this sort of like racist bioessentialism. Well, there's two things. One, it's important to recall that I don't know why I have to say this, but I think I do, given what the Muskite faction believes, is that scientific racism, this is also from Serwer, could be called fantasy racism, because it is a belief that people can be reduced to quantifiable numbers like so many digits on a character sheet. Human beings, human races, like that's not real. There's no significant biological differences between races. Race is fake. I mean, it's real, but it's fake. But like Musk and people in his orbit believe it's not.
It's a social and historical construction, right?
That's right.
Perpetuate inequalities. I don't know. Read someone smarter than me if you want to. Barbara Fields.
Gould. Yeah. It's weird that we have to still talk about this, because part of this is that like Musk and a lot of people in the sort of like Silicon Valley VC class, Peter Thiel, investors in a bunch of investors in Tesla and OpenAI, like, will come out and say, and like, yes, I believe that black people have lower IQs, or like are like less qualified to fly planes. This is a weird one. This keeps coming up. And I'm like, that used to be like disqualifying for like being in like the public view, but now it's just a thing that we have to pretend that Elon Musk isn't saying every day. It's important to note that's not true. It simply isn't true. But to come back to D&D,
right.
The thing about this is, on a sort of like less dramatic note, it does sort of like impact the way that people play games, right? In one of the articles I read, one of the writers was talking about how, like, if you have somebody who plays an elf, they're going to play an elf that's generally they're going to sort of like default to, oh, I'm a beautiful, sexy, smart elf. If they play a dwarf, they're going to be like, I love, rocks and meat. And if they play an orc, they're going to play somebody who's like, a rage monster barbarian. Like, one time I played an elf barbarian in a D&D game, which was, for me, fun. I was like, this is a clever play against type. And I kept having to remind people what my class was and like what my race was, because like they kept being like, wait, what are you? Because I don't think it was like that complicated of a character, but because I was playing against type, it really like messed with people's brains. And the thing is, these archetypes, these stereotypes have knocked on to Warcraft, Warhammer, The Elder Scrolls, Dragon Age, The Witcher, and into like every D&D like RPG that exists. Draw Steel has all these races. Daggerheart has all these races. There are attempts made again and again and again, respectable, good attempts to do something interesting, make elves different, makes orcs different. But people, if not prompted, because of the influence of D&D, will default to sort of like these assumptions about like what the race is, how they play, and what that means to the game.
Yeah. And a lot of those properties, like I would say on one end of the spectrum, something like Warcraft, World of Warcraft, leaning into like big dumb orcs who are big and green, like has created this like huge fandom for big beefy orcs with tusks that people love. And like
people love. I love
that's
them.
beautiful. Yeah,
Yes.
I know. I remember when we started playing World of Warcraft, you were so mad because I insisted on us being in the Alliance.
I was upset because I wanted to play an orc and everyone was in the Alliance.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like...
So that's on one end of the spectrum. On the other end, like I think there's other properties that have like, oh, okay, maybe not the most profound books of all, but I think like the Witcher books and the TV show have interesting things, maybe not super interesting on like, what is a monster? What is a human? Okay, it's pretty obvious here. And like, oh...
Listen, the bar is low. The Witcher is doing something interesting.
I don't want to spoil the series, but read to the end and see what happens to Geralt. And, you can see...
Right.
Or Geralt. Sorry, it was in my head as Geralt for so many years. How he ends the book, let's say, thinking about, fantasy racism.
And in the Elder Scrolls, they do something interesting with orcs and dwarves. They're all part of the same family of elves, in quotes, but they still look like orcs. They still have tusks and things, and they're green. But I do actually I enjoy. I'm a big fan of orcs in general, but like mostly because I like to play against type, and so I think it's fun to have orcs that are different than the standard. So like this is not like a hour-long argument against orcs as a concept. I'm pro orc. We love Bright, don't we, Matt? We love our orc cop.
One of our favorite types. Yes. Look, but I think what we're saying is like there are many ways that you can play around with this, discard it, lean into it, reverse in types at your own table with your own characters, with your own world building or writing, and go for it. But I think it's interesting to think about it for 5 seconds. And then I guess we'll have to eventually get to the flip side of the Mark Kerns and Elon Musks who don't want you to think about it and why they don't.
And that's
why
I think
they don't want you to think about this at all.
That's why I wanted to talk about this. And I think this is the unique insight of Serwer's article is he ties it back to what we were just talking about, that these guys have an investment in racial, social, economic hierarchies. They're deeply invested in things being the way that they are, and that being right and correct. And so anything that even so slightly challenges an idea of this is how things ought to be, such as saying, again, something as completely innocuous as like, what if orcs were not all savages, right? Is a mental like wound. Like it causes clearly causes Elon Musk distress to like think about this.
What if someone, while reprinting the whole thing in full, mentioned that the original D&D document had some instances of sexism?
Yes.
Right. And an explicit dig at women's lib. It hurts them because this is the way they would like the world to be.
Yeah,
I think is the only, and I mean, it's not surprising. Better writers and podcasters than us have dug into why does Elon Musk have these biological determinist views? Why does he believe in economic hierarchies? I mean, this one's not hard. He's the world's richest man, which reminding myself of that fact is insane that he would even dare to care about this.
There's a part of me that's like, why are we talking about this? But I'm like, oh, right. He is literally the richest man. He is worth $500 billion. Part of what's funny about this is like, if he cared about games, and the reason why this is so frustrating is because he doesn't care about D&D. We mentioned in a previous episode, he talks about in one of his mini biographies going to like the Peoria Mall in the 80s to pick up a D&D module. I don't believe that Elon Musk has ever played Dungeons and Dragons. I think he like flipped through the book. I think he likes the idea of it. I think he's played video games that resemble D&D. I am not convinced that he has ever sat down with like a group of people and played Dungeons and Dragons. Certainly not in...
I mean, I couldn't ever get Elon Musk to respond, though maybe I should just post on X, the everything
You
app.
should.
But
just keep adding
I
him
did
until he pays
message
attention. Yeah.
his childhood friend and be like, hey, did you ever play? And if so, what module? What's going on? And I've sent him several messages, and he
never got back to us.
Not responded. So
the point is that, I mean, Elon Musk is like the world's like most incurious man. Like he has never, I think, had like more than a split second of like reflection on anything that has ever happened to him, or anything he has ever cared about. So like, it's not really worth. It both is and isn't worth spending like a lot of time on his reaction to this, because it's like so obviously like a reaction. He's like, wait,
right,
somebody's insulting Gary Gygax, the creator of Dungeons and Dragons, a thing that I vaguely am attached to because I'm a nerd. So I'm mad about that. Yeah, I'm a gamer.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I think given the pattern of his rhetoric over the past 5 or 6 years, I think it's very clear that not only does he have these like visceral reactions as he feels like his, admittedly like really bad childhood is under attack, or the like only good parts of it, but I think it's clear that he has a vision for the world of pop culture, and that when he sees things in art or especially more lowbrow, middlebrow stuff like D&D or video games that he cares about going in a different way, he is going to post about it in hopes of influencing it, right? This is the culture war part. He is participating in the culture, not to add or to think or dialogue or discourse, but to fight in one very clear direction. Yes. And D&D is just one battlefront in his mind.
Yes. One battle in the culture war. And to be clear, it is a both and. He is responding emotionally to something, but he has an ideology and an agenda, which is, like all good conservatives, to stand athwart history and shout, stop, which is, we'll see whether or not he can accomplish it. I mean, he can't. The thing is, like, this is the point that's made in the article. This battle is lost. Like it, love it or don't. Like we have said multiple times in this episode, we're not actually huge fans of Wizards or Hasbro. In fact, quite the opposite. But like, that ship has sailed. Like this is now what it looks like. Oh God, I just remembered all the people. Sorry, I had memory hold this mad. Like a bunch of people were mad about some art last month that depicted like a bunch of like queer, I guess, looking people in like a D&D tavern.
Looking happy. Yeah.
People looking happy in like a town square. There was like a friendly beholder, and a bunch of nerds got really mad about it.
Yeah.
Because like that's what D&D is now. That's what it looks like.
I think this is also, and this is why Mark Kern knows about this stuff. This is why eventually Elon Musk knows about this, is there is a class of essentially mostly posters, but sometimes also content creators like video bloggers, vloggers, if you will. And sometimes those people actually make games too, but that seems pretty infrequently.
Less and less often.
I also think most of the people who post about this do not actually play games that very often, which is part of the reason they need to post. But right. There's a mill creating this content because it gets clicks from not just D&D people, but the broader reactionary culture war stuff. And, there are some people who can make some money off of it or gain some fame off of it. And so it's a continual, content mill of, creator who has made X, it's usually video games, to be honest, right?
Right,
video
right.
game, role-playing game book, but especially D&D role-playing game book that I don't like for culture war reasons. Let's all get mad about it together.
And in general, you should ignore this stuff because it is a small group of angry people without a lot of influence. However, as we have mentioned, the world's richest man counts himself among their number and has influence. It is funny. He's worth what, $500 billion? Like for less than 1% of his wealth, he could fund the wealthiest and like most well-resourced game design company for 1,000 years. He could pay more game designers than exist
For a TTRPG.
For a TTRPG. I mean, he could also do it for a game, but like he could easily do this for a TTRPG. He could fund a D&D competitor that would make, gross chud shit and publish it in glossy magazines. It would never have to make a single penny, and he could pay 100 people more than any current designer gets paid, and he would never miss the money. But he's not going to do that because like he doesn't actually care about games. He cares about the culture.
Did we answer the question, like, why does Elon, Adam Serwer answered it for us, right? Why does he need it to stay sexist and racist? Well, it's not a complicated answer. He believes in these hierarchies and he wants his pop art to reflect them. And in hopes that like this will also make other people who play it have that same ideology, I think.
That's right. And we were driving towards this.
Which is also kind of silly, I think.
Yeah, I got sidetracked getting angry about other stuff. But like he clearly like it's sort of hard to see like where he draws the line. It's obvious that like Musk does not see large swaths of humanity as human. His actions at USAID and just like generally how he talks about people suggest that he doesn't really consider huge parts of the world population to be of the same type of human as him. It is kind of hard to tell like where that begins and ends. It's possible that he doesn't consider anybody but himself and maybe his brood to be human, but like at the very least he believes that there are racial hierarchies at which he is the top. And so if he were to entertain even for a moment that like there's something complicated about the way that D&D treats people, women, races, that would be a, I think, unacceptable challenge to the way that he like approaches the entire world. And I think that's probably the same for a lot of the people in his orbit. A lot of the same Silicon Valley types that like this kind of thing. It's just even like a tiny moment of reflection on Tolkien, on D&D is a threat because it can undermine the whole sort of like belief system that allows them to do what they do, which is quite monstrous to be honest. And you need to have sort of like an ironclad belief in your own infallibility to do monstrous things.
Well said. Well, so was the real monsters weren't orcs. It was Elon Musk.
It was Elon Musk. Yeah. Sorry, we circled it back around to it's capitalism after all. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah. No. Listen. Thinking about art is a dangerous gateway drug to all kinds of things.
It can be hard,
writing
but also
essays,
it can be
reading
fun.
essays.
Yes.
Being obnoxious at cocktail parties, like
Yes.
it's really quite dangerous. Maybe even surprise, creating better art or art that you love even more.
Perhaps.
The interesting thing, the good news is that I think the tabletop role playing community and games overall are more interesting and made and played by more like diverse and interesting people than ever before. That's like a unequivocal good thing. And the interesting thing is like, hey, they carry this like interesting and problematic. We'll say it. We're saying problematic again. Baggage from original D&D, from war games, from Tolkien, and thinking about that is kind of fun and might help you create art that you like better in the future. Or you could never think about it because it somehow destroys your view of hierarchies in the real world.
Yeah. Well, and a point that Riggs makes in his article about this, and that I think Serwer makes, is that engaging with this and being honest with it makes it sort of like doesn't and sort of honors the game and the hobby by pointing out how great it is, despite these things. And they I think feel differently than me. Personally, I think specifically when it comes to Gary Gygax, everything that is good about D&D is in spite of him. I think that if he had his way, if he had more creative control, the game would suck way more than it does. And everything cool and good that has come out of TTRPGs has largely been people who had an opposite instinct to Gary. Whether or not you believe that is fine, but like the point is that because we're able to be honest and grow and evolve past where it was, we are now living in a period of flourishing when it comes to TTRPG creation. And that's cool. That's a really good thing.
Yeah. Well, listeners, thanks, I think, for coming on this journey, with us. Do we have any other final thoughts? I didn't want to say anything else because that seemed
no. I do think we closed the loop. I think we made the point we were trying to make. I hope we don't have to talk about this too much more, but like I said a couple of times, this stuff is interesting to me. I think it's challenging and compelling, and I think the complicated history of both like Tolkien and D&D and games is worth engaging with, because if you can put aside some of your feelings about it, it impacts a lot of how we talk about the world and how we engage with games, and it's worth looking into. But yeah, I think we covered it.
I hope we get to talk about it again, because once we get over the cycle of culture war that brings it to our attention, you have a lot of interesting points to make, and it's fun to talk about with you, Rob.
Yeah.
And if you want to hear us talking more, you can head to patreon.com/dungeonmasternone for a bonus episode every month, plus some other goodies. It's $5.
If you have thoughts, good or bad, you can email us at dmofnone@gmail.com. You can join our Discord, link in the show notes.
And links in the show notes to a lot of the articles that we discussed, especially Adam Serwer's.
As always, thanks for listening, everybody, and keep rolling them dice.